Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
This recording is part of the Northern California Tape Library of alcoholism and was recorded at the second annual Sierra Nevada Roundup held in Reno, Nevada, August the 3rd through the 5th, 1979. This is the banquet speaker meeting of August the 4th. The speaker, Tom Brady of Dobson, North Carolina. Please observe the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous and do not play this recording for entertainment or commercial purposes. And please do not break the anonymity of the speaker or any AA member at any public level. The original record and this copy were both made by Bart Daniel of 1332 Santa Ynez Way, Sacramento, California, zip 95816.
I want you to give a real warm welcome to a fellow who's come a long ways, it looks like, Tom B. from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Bad noise. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Tom Brady, Jr. Hi, everybody. And by the grace of God, which has come to me through my attempts to practice the 12 steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I haven't had a drink of alcohol since July 20th, 1965. Up until 2 weeks ago, I was a member of the Basics group in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we have since moved to the metropolis of Dobson, North Carolina, and I'm now a member of the Mayberry group of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you remember the Andy Griffith show, he was born in a little town called Mount Airy, and they called it Mayberry on his program, and Mount Airy is about 9 miles from Dobson. It's fantastic to see the people come up and say that they have been sober for varying lengths of time. This program really works. There's no doubt about it. I'm proud to be a member of what I consider the finest and most effective, life-changing program on the face of the earth. There is none like it. This is help your brother and help your sister in its finest sense, and I love it. This is big book country, and I'm glad, because that's the kind of country I come from. I might as well warn you before I start that as well as being an alcoholic, I'm a Baptist. And being a Baptist is an awful lot like being an alcoholic. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Once a Baptist, always a Baptist. And if I preach to you tonight, I make no apology for that. I'm Baptist to the core. I was raised in the Baptist church, quite literally raised in the Baptist church. And I heard sermons at least 4 times a week. And have you ever heard a Baptist preacher that didn't give all his examples in triplicate? Well, you'll probably hear one of those tonight. I feel a little bit like the little boy who lived down in the Sand Hills in North Carolina. And the Sand Hills is a flat sandy region covered with long-leaf pine trees. And every time I talk, and I've been talking a long time, but I'm always nervous, and I always feel like Cook felt this afternoon, that I'm going to wet my pants any moment. AA hasn't done a damn thing for my bladder. And I always feel like this little kid, he was forever getting lost. Every day he would go out in the flat pine forest and he'd be playing, and the sun would start going down and he would realize he was lost. And you can't shimmy up a long leaf pine to find your direction, and every day they had to send out a search party to find this little kid. And they sent out for him time after time after time. Finally one day he got home and his mom said to him, "Cook, next time you're out there and you're lost, get on your knees and ask God to show you the way home," and he will. And the very next day he's out there and he's playing and having a good time, and the sun goes down and he realizes, "Oh, Lord, I'm lost again." But he remembered what his mother said, and he got down on his knees and very reverently said, "Lord, I'm lost, and I want you to show me by some sign how to get out of here. Amen." And he held his hand out here and nothing happened, and he held it out here and nothing happened, and he held it around here and nothing happened, and he held it out here and a little bird flew over and dropped one right in his hand. And he looked at it and shook it off, got back down on his knees, and very reverently said, "Lord, don't hand me no crap. I'm really lost." And you know, all of us are a bit like that little kid. How many of us begged God for answers, and when we got them, we didn't like the method of delivery. So it wasn't a true answer. You see, we all knew what the answer ought to be, and the way the answer ought to come, did we not? You've been reading some of your favorite parts of the book, and I'm going to take advantage of that and read from page 132 and 133 in the big book. Some of my very favorite parts nowadays. It says, "We aren't a glum lot. If newcomers could see no joy or fun in our existence, they wouldn't want it. We absolutely insist on enjoying life. So we think cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness. Outsiders are sometimes shocked when we burst into merriment over a seemingly tragic experience out of the past. But why shouldn't we laugh? We have recovered and have been given the power to help others. We are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free." The next time you think about God's will, and you're thinking of it in terms of something very heavy and something that will be hard to handle, please remember those words in the big book. We are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. One of the best things I do today that does me more good than anything else is laugh. And it's even better when I can laugh at myself. And when a perfectionist like me can laugh at himself when he makes some of the damnedest mistakes you've ever saw. Progress has been made. I have great news for you tonight, too. There's a group of doctors in the United States that has discovered the cause of alcoholism. They're convinced that we suffer from a Valium deficiency. And they're trying their best to overcome this situation. You can get 100 from most any doctor you go to, you know. Get that good feeling. Lots of people are living better through chemistry. It reminds me of a story of a little kid who got a chemistry set for Christmas. And he took it down in the basement and he mixed up some gook. He didn't know what he was doing, but he kept mixing until he got this blue gook. And he had a can of worms sitting over there, and he grabbed a worm and dipped him in that blue gook. And the worm got just as hard as a piece of steel. So he made him a can full of these worms. And he went out in the front yard, got his grandfather's hammer, and was sitting out in the front yard driving worms in the ground. And his grandpa comes out and says, "Son, why waste my nails? I've told you about that. I pay so much money for those things." He said, "Grandpa, these ain't nails. These is worms." He said, "Son, what'd I tell you about lying to me?" I said, "I'm not lying. Watch." And he got old squiggly worm and dipped him in his blue gook, took him and drove him in the ground. His granddaddy said, "Son, I'll give you $1 if you leave a dish of that on the dresser in my bedroom tonight." And the little kid left it up there, and the next morning he went up, and there was $3 laying on the dresser. And he went to his grandfather and said, "Grandpa, you told me you were going to leave me $1 for that dish of blue gook." He said, "Oh, I did." Said, "The other 2 was from your grandma." You know, I was talking in South Carolina not long ago, and this lady came up very seriously, said to me, "I don't need any help with the program. Been sober 20-some years, but tell me where I can get some of that blue gook." I'm not going to talk to you much tonight about externals. I think it makes very little difference if we're man or woman, or young or old, or rich or poor, or educated or uneducated, or professional or non-professional, or whether we were daily drinkers or periodic drinkers. I could stand here all night and try to match drinking patterns with you, and I could not. I could try to match profession, social standing, education, lack of education, and all these things, and I could not. These are externals. These have to do with personality and environment. But our drinking does not have to do with that. And I believe that once you get beyond these externals and get down to the nitty-gritty about alcoholism, and you look at the internal alcoholic, that every single alcoholic is about 99.44% exactly alike inside. We do have characteristics which are similar. And what holds us together in this program is not all those things I mentioned before, nor is it drinking patterns that hold us. What holds us together in this problem, according to the Big Book, is we have a common problem to which we have found a common solution. It's our similarities that hold us together, not our differences. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about my insides, my feelings, because that's where I think the problem lies. The Big Book says alcohol is just a symptom. We had to get down to causes and conditions, and that's what I'll try to do. Many people say this is a selfish program. It is. It's selfish like breathing is selfish. We sometimes don't stop to look and try to comprehend the way this world is built. This is a giving world. It was built that way by Almighty God. There's great harmony. There's complete perfection in this world. You know, if you breathe in and you don't breathe out, pretty soon you'll turn blue and you'll die. But when you do breathe out, you feed the plants. And the plants in return feed other human beings. So it is with sobriety and the selfish program of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you breathe it in and you do not share it, sooner or later you will have a brain explosion and you will die. If not physically, you will die spiritually. But if you just breathe it out, it keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. And it never gets less, it always gets greater. Every alcoholic who breathes this program helps me. Every alcoholic I breathe this program to, I help and he helps me in return. This is a beautiful place and a beautiful world. I believe that sobriety can be learned just like we learn arithmetic. You know, if you want to learn arithmetic, you sign up for the course and you pay your tuition. And you go to class with other people who are trying to learn arithmetic. And you listen to your teachers. And you do your work assignments. And you take your test. And you learn. You pass arithmetic. Sobriety to me is no different. You sign up for the course if you want to be sober. You pay your tuition. And oh God, some of us have paid a high tuition. You buy your textbook. You read it. You go to class with other people who are trying to learn sobriety. You listen to your instructors. We call them sponsors. You do your work assignments. And lo and behold, you learn sobriety. I want to call your attention to something the Big Book says, which I consider very important. It says we've been physically and mentally ill, but we've been spiritually sick also. And it says when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically, not the other way around. I'm one of those people who believes you can straighten out an alcoholic and get him in the finest shape you've ever seen, mentally and physically, and he'll probably walk right out and get drunk. Because the problem has not been touched. Alcoholism to me is a deeply and essentially and fundamentally a disease of the spirit. And it deals with finite men and women trying to be infinite God. But when the spiritual malady is overcome, we do straighten out mentally and physically. A lot of us in AA too. It has been my observation to try to work this program our way. The directions are clear-cut. They're explicit. They're simple. Every problem is mapped out. Every road, every path is given to us. Every warning sign is in the book. And we insist on doing it our way. It's like a fellow was selling chainsaws, and he put them on sale, $5 down, $5 a week. And one of the old mountain men from North Carolina came in and bought one of them. And he said, how much wood can I cut with this thing? He said, about 8 cords a day. And he said, I'll take it. And he paid his $5 down, and he took the saw out, and the next day he came back. Boy, he looked tired. He said, I worked 11 hours yesterday, and all I could cut was 2 cords of wood. What's wrong with this saw? And the man said, give it back to me and I'll see. And he took the saw and pulled and started the engine. And the guy said, what's that noise? You know, I'm one of those who believes we let the program work. We use all the power in the program. This is not a my way program. This is a program that's taken from a book which was approved, mind you, by 100 alcoholics. And if you can get 100 drunks to agree on anything, you got a damn good thing. And I guess we better get down to those internals I was talking about. I'm an idealist. I was born an idealist. I was born with a tremendous sense of the way things ought to be. I knew internally how the world ought to be, and how the people in it ought to be, and how I ought to be. And the world wasn't what it ought to be, and the people weren't what they ought to be, and I certainly wasn't what I ought to be. I spent 30 years of my life giving all of my energy and attention to what I ought to be. I was so hung up on what I ought to be and what I was supposed to be, I didn't have time to be. And I found a great secret in Alcoholics Anonymous, that by being what I am, I'm becoming what I always thought I ought to be. But I didn't know it at this time. The world frightened me. It frightened me badly because it wasn't what it ought to be. I'm the kind of human being who always looked for answers. And I wanted an answer with a capital A. Don't give me a little answer. And don't you dare, even today, give me part of an answer. I'll drive you crazy till I get the whole answer, because I'm an alcoholic. I wanted an answer. But it had to be a specific kind of an answer. It had to be an answer first that solved all of my problems. And secondly, it had to be an answer that felt good. Two conditions on the answers. And I looked for answers all over the place. I always believed. There was never a time in my life I did not believe in God. But I was like it says in the book of James. If you believe in God, that's no big deal. So do the devils. I'm one who believes that the essence of the spiritual life is not faith. The essence of the spiritual life is practice. We do it, and we do it, and we do it. I'm a sensitive human being. Many people don't realize that we alcoholics are so sensitive. I walked around with my feelings sticking out 50 yards in all directions, and God help you if you stepped on them. But the funny thing about me was, if nobody stepped on my feelings, I'd go find somebody to hurt. I did that all my life, walking around looking to get hurt. And if you're looking to get hurt, you get hurt. I can hear a beautiful piece of music, look at a beautiful scene in nature, and get chill bumps all over me, and cry like a baby. I've always been that way. And I'm a romantic. I've never met an alcoholic who wasn't a romantic, by the way. I loved atmosphere. I found out after I was about 5 years sober, atmosphere wasn't a thing but a dirty place with very few lights in it. And of course, being a romantic, I loved women. Present tense, I love women. One poet said God had never made anything as lovely as a tree. I firmly disagree. I'll take women every time. And as an alcoholic romantic, I loved beautiful women, and attractive women, and mediocre women, and ugly women, and atrocious women. I have woke up with women look like they'd been dead a year. And you know, that's those mornings when you got two reasons to puke. And both of them ain't booze, you know. You look down, oh my God, I did it again. But you see, the night before in all that atmosphere, she was one of God's loveliest creatures. I know you ladies never did that either. You know. And I still love music. And I love beautiful things. And you know, I even love ugly things. It's fantastic. I always had an extreme sense of being apart from everything and everybody. I guess you'd call it an extreme amount of ego. I always felt different, never a part of. When I was drinking, I could go into a bar, and I wasn't like those other people, and there could be 1,000 of them in there, and I was alone. I never felt like I was a part of anything, and I was. That's the irony of it. I was always close to my classmates, they thought. I ran with groups. I wasn't a loner. I didn't hang around by myself all the time. They thought I fit, but I didn't feel like I fit. I never felt like I fit. And that's the reason I don't talk about externals in Alcoholics Anonymous. Too many alcoholics come to an AA meeting and listen to a man like me or a woman like Marilyn talk, and they try to identify with the externals. And they say to themselves, I've never been to jail. I've never been to a psycho ward. I've never done this. I've never done that. She's older. She's younger. Therefore, I'm different. And they go out and get drunk. The moment an alcoholic can stand up, sit down, and listen to anyone talk and identify with the internal characteristics and say to himself, yes, that's me, then he is starting to get well. But as long as you're looking for differences, you can find all you want. The big book says we're men and women who ordinarily would not mix. We wouldn't be together. And yet we're held together with tighter bonds than most other groups on the face of the earth because of the common problem, common solution, because of our internal state of being. As far back in my life as I can remember, I was afraid. I read a book by a psychologist once in which he listed 206 different fears. And true alcoholic, when I got to the end of the list, I'd had them all. But I got to the end of that list and I thought to myself, no, there's one more fear. There's one this psychiatrist doesn't know about. Fear number 207. The fear that every alcoholic on the face of God's earth has felt and probably will feel again. The fear that Bill Wilson called the fear of impending calamity. Impending doom. Disaster. And with me it went like this. Oh my God. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I don't know who's going to do it, where it's going to happen, when or why it's going to happen. But something's going to happen to me, and it's going to be bad. Even the shrinks have a special name for this kind of fear. They call it free-floating anxiety. I don't know about you, mine damn sure didn't float. I like the teenage expression today for it, you know. They say we're wired. And I love it, and I was wired. There was hardly anything I wasn't afraid of. With the other characteristics I just described to you, how could I be anything else but afraid? And I look back on my life, and I had a lot to be afraid about. And there was a long time I couldn't talk about this. I was the ugliest baby you ever saw. My own mother told me she had never seen an ugly baby until I was born. The psychiatrist told me once that must have been a traumatic thing for me. And I said, no, sir, I've seen my baby pictures. You know, you see books, Sobriety and Beyond, and Franklin W. from over in Mississippi is threatening to write one called Humility and Beyond, and I'm going to write one day called Ugly and Beyond. I mean, I was ugly. I didn't blame my mother after I saw those pictures. And in my day and time, when you were growing up, you know, you wanted to be manly if you were a little boy. They call it macho nowadays. I want to be macho. My father had 6 of the biggest macho brothers you've ever seen in your life. And my mother had 4 completely manly men that I wanted to be like. The one I wanted to be like the most was my Uncle Dud. Uncle Dud was a motorcycle cop. And he was a motorcycle cop in the days when they wore riding breeches and spats up to their knees, you know. And he was all leather and gunpowder, and he squeaked when he walked. And people respected him. And I could jump up behind him on that motorcycle, and I was what I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to be like. Smell like gunpowder, shaving lotion, and squeak when I walked. I mean it. I was serious. And as I grew up, I grew this great shock of snow white hair. Not gold hair, not blonde, snow white hair. And you know what my macho uncles call me? Pudding head. Cotton top. It's hard to be macho when they're calling you pudding head. Even when I was 18 years old, my nickname was Sweet Lips. And to add insult to injury, I had freckles. I had freckles from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. I had freckles where you ain't supposed to have freckles. But I had them there, and I hated them. I hated them. I hated that snow white hair, and I hated those freckles, and if that wasn't enough, I was skinny. I was so skinny when I turned sideways, I looked like a tricycle ready to ride off any time. And then my mother had this thing about knickers. Any of you fellas have to wear knickers? Brown corduroy knickers? And your legs that big and knicker holes that big? You're trying to be macho and you swish when you walk? And you go up to the blackboard in school and start writing, and that damn knicker leg would fall down, and you'd grab it and pull. I was forever pulling up them knickers. I hated them. And I'd hide them and throw them away. I think she had a year's supply. She had put another pair on me. Then when I went to the Baptist church, I had to wear a little blue cap on the back of my snow white hair. I tell Mama today, you made me wear a yarmulke, and I ain't even Jewish. Now look at my pictures as a kid, and I wasn't that ugly. I was a fine-looking little boy. Here's the point. I felt I was ugly. Now, Flint Wilson had a TV show. And on his TV show, he had a gal named Geraldine. And Geraldine would throw her hand up on her hip and say, honey, what you see is what you get. I want to give you that tonight to think about. Is it not really true? If you see this world as an ugly, forbidding, frightening place, then that's what it is. If you see the people in it as people who do not want to help you but want to hurt you, who do not like you, who talk about you, who put you down, then that's what it is. And I'll call to your attention that the only thing that this program promises to give is in the 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening. We wake up. We change our perception. And what we see is different. Therefore, what we get is different. Felt I was ugly. And I used to figure to myself, man, if I can ever get rid of these freckles, everything will be all right. And I did. Around about the age of 12 or 13, they were replaced with the most beautiful set of pimples you ever saw in your life. And my mom and dad were old-fashioned. And they used to tell me, Tommy, if you do certain things, you'll get pimples on your face. And I used to say I didn't do those things. The hell I didn't. And I was good at it. I had a natural talent. Psychologist told me once it was a good release for tension. And boy, was I tense. And this added a new kind of fear to my life. You know, all I had to do was walk down the street and people look at my face and they knew what I was doing. It's like I had a sign over my head saying, he's doing it, he's doing it, he's doing it. And I began to feel they were all staring at me and talking about me, and they knew what I was doing, and they didn't like me. And that'll make you nervous. It came to a point in my life that I could not get on an elevator with other people because I felt so intensely that they were staring at me. I couldn't walk into a cafeteria. I couldn't go anywhere where there were people whose eyes I felt burning into my back. I was almost completely paranoid. Frightened. I know what fear is. I had to find some answers. And I figured in my mind, if only I can control these people. If only I can control situations, events, and circumstances, maybe I won't get hurt. If I can control people, situations, events, and circumstances, maybe I won't be afraid. All of my attention turned into me and my needs. All of my actions had to do with me and my needs, and preventing the hurt that I knew was coming if I was not in control. And I became utterly selfish. I became utterly selfish because I honestly felt I had to be selfish. My system of beliefs wouldn't allow me to believe anything else. You know, ironically, our faith in certain things keeps us drunk for a long time. I always believed I was alone. Nobody was going to help me. I was no damn good. Nobody understood me. There was a God, but He didn't care about me. I had a whole system of beliefs, things that I believed in with all of my heart. And that belief system had to be changed. And I set out to control. I became an achiever. Any achievers out there? I excelled in school. I never made below an A in school until I was 15 years old. And that's when I took my first drink. And school was out. I excelled at everything I did. I got into the habit of heading for the top. I had to be in first place, never second, never third, always first. And if I didn't make first place, my perfectionism would tell me if I wasn't the best, I was automatically the worst. For we alcoholics, there is no in-between. For we perfectionists, either we're on top or in our own minds, we're on the bottom. And if you'll notice, both extremes are perfectionistic. A psychiatrist asked me once, "What do you think of yourself?" Excuse my language. I told him I'm the sorriest son of a bitch in the world. No hesitation. I told him right off the bat, but you notice I told him I was the sorriest. Backwards, top of the heap. I had to be on top. When I was in the psycho ward, I had to out-nut all the nuts. I did. I pulled it off, too. In the Baptist church, there was a group of boys called the Royal Ambassadors for Christ. And the highest rank in that outfit was Ambassador Plenipotentiary. And I couldn't even say the word, but I was one quicker than anybody had ever been one before. And they gave me a golden shield and a golden sword and a golden crown, and had me stand up in front of 2,000 people at church and recite memory verses. And I could recite memory verses you knew and memory verses you didn't know, memory verses you had heard and memory verses you didn't want to hear. And long after you quit listening, I still reciting memory verses. And everybody patted me on the back, and everybody approved of me. And the mothers said to their little boys, "Why aren't you like Tommy? Why don't you do the thing?" Everybody was satisfied. Everybody there was satisfied except one person. Guess who? Me. I was standing there saying, "So what? What's next?" You see, in my life, anything I set out after, I put my whole being into it. Be it a job, a diploma, a woman, anything. And once I got these things, I no longer wanted them. It never failed. And I never did anything in my life to satisfy me. I never did it well enough to be satisfied with me. And perfectionists are that way. If you don't think you're a perfectionist, let me ask you a question. How long can you look at a crooked picture before you have to straighten it? My outside time is about 7 seconds. I just got to, I can stand it. Everything got to be just so. Just so. And perfectionists see everything in extremes. Either or. Black or white. No in between. Perfectionists do not allow themselves to make mistakes. When perfectionists make mistakes, they use the hatchet on themselves. They don't like themselves because they're not measuring up to what they ought to be. So that by the time I got to this program, I hated my guts. I had failed over and over and over in my own mind to be what I thought I ought to be, and I hated me. and achievement didn't really work. You know, I achieved while I was drunk. I graduated college with a 3.94 average out of a possible 4. I was in every honor society that they had. I was voted outstanding biblical student, who's who among students in American universities and colleges. And I was drunk 75% of the time. But the other 25%, boy, did I go. And I was a good test taker. And I had a photographic memory. And all I had to do when I took a test was to match my notes by the number to the number of the question. I had no problem whatsoever. I excelled. I dreamed a lot, too. If you can't stand reality, you dream a lot. I was always dreaming. Like I heard Fergie say last night, I was always dreaming about what I was going to be when I grew up. I used to say to my wife when I was drunk, honey, how would you like to be married to a Baptist preacher that practiced law and medicine on the side? I wanted to be everything. And I could be in my dreams, you know. In my dream world, I could be anywhere I wanted to be, doing anything I wanted to be, and be satisfied with me. But dreams are transient. Dreams pass. I heard a storyteller, guy told a story about dreamers one time. 2 winos sleeping under this bridge. Said one of them shook too. You know, alcoholics and winos, they don't wake up, they shake too. He shook too and punched his buddy. He said, I had the best dream I ever had in my life last night. Said, yes. Said, what'd you dream? Said, I dreamed my mama called me home, gave me $25 and told me to go spend the whole day at Disneyland. He said, did you go? Said, yeah. Said, I saw Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse, and I rode all the rides, heard all the music, had the best time I ever had in my life. The other drunk punched him and said, that ain't nothing. I had a better dream than that. He said, yeah, what'd you dream? He said, I dreamed I had me a luxury apartment, and I had 2 cases of Jack Daniels. And so came a knock on the door, and the most beautiful blonde and redhead you ever saw in your life started through the door and started disrobing. And the other drunk was caught up in the story, and he punched him and said, why didn't you call me? He said, well, I did, but your mama said you was at Disneyland. That's me. I'll tell you the truth. The last time I was dreaming about what I was going to be when I grew up was just before I got up here to talk. It doesn't pass overnight. I spent a lot of time dreaming. I could not stand reality. I spent a lot of time deceiving, pretending to be what I was not, pretending to feel what I did not feel, pretending to do what I couldn't do. The big book says all alcoholics are very much the actor. There's our stage character that we want to present to the world and we want them to see, and there's the inner person that we hope will never see the light of day. And I was a good actor. Another answer that I sought was sex. I've told you that my conditions for an answer had to be that it solved all my problems, and it felt good. I want to point out here that in my opinion, if you're using sex as an answer, then you're participating in sick sex. And I have seen sick sex kill almost as many alcoholics as booze, because it inevitably leads back to the preferable answer, the one which is reliable, dependable, and predictable: alcohol. And I say this from experience, not before but after sobriety, when things were not going so well with my wife and I. And I began to look around, and I found a gorgeous redhead, and I became obsessed with her. And she became the total center of my life, the answer. When things were good with her, they were good with me. When they were bad with her, they were bad with me. You see, I'd already found my answer in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I jumped from the one to the other. And thank God I did not drink. But I became almost totally insane. Think about it. And think about it hard. Sick sex will kill you. When I was 15 years old, I was on a singing trip with a high school choir with some older, more experienced men of 17 and 18. And it was after hours, and we were in a hotel room, and they called a cab driver in Greensboro, North Carolina, and they gave him $7.50, and he came back bringing a bottle of brown fluid. And I'll never forget the label. It said Cream of Kentucky. And one guy in the group that I looked up to the most was named Clifton Baker, and we called him Egghead. And one guy in the group that I looked up to the most was named Clifton Baker, and we called him Egghead. And I said, Egghead, what do we do with this stuff? And he said, Tom, you drink a water glass full of it as fast as you can. Then you drink a water glass full of water as fast as you can. And you keep on doing it, and after a while, you're going to feel good. Egghead lied to me. Oh, God. I went in and stood in front of the bathroom mirror, and I can picture it just as clearly in my mind tonight, in front of the bathroom mirror, and watch myself take my first drink. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid. For the first time in my life, the sensitivity disappeared. For the very first time in my life, I was where I wanted to be, doing what I wanted to be doing with the people I wanted to do it with, and I was totally satisfied with me. We say that alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. Yes, it's powerful. Because what alcohol gave me that night when I was 15 years old is what I had sought from the moment I came into this earth. Freedom. I felt loose. I felt free for the first time in my life. And anything that can give us a sense of freedom is powerful. Everybody else passed out. Not me. I called the cab driver. I gave him $7.50. I got me a pint of Cream of Kentucky. You see, I found my answer. It solved all of my problems, and it felt good. And for the next 15 years, I sought with all my heart, soul, and strength that same feeling again. And it never lasted. You see, a problem with me was this. If I felt good, I wanted to feel better. And if I felt better, I wanted to feel best. And if there was something beyond best, I was going for that. And every time I'd say, maybe one more will do it, and zoop, I went right past it. I never was able to find that feeling again, but I tried. It did something for me that nothing else had ever done. We don't dare take away an alcoholic's answer, do we? Unless we have a substitute. And the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, says we have found the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous to be a sufficient substitute and more. And if you do take away his answer and you don't give him a sufficient substitute, he'll turn to pills or he'll turn to women, he'll turn to some pseudo-answer. And he'll eventually return to the only thing that has ever given him that sense of freedom: alcohol. By the time I was 23, I had had over 1,000 stitches taken in my face alone as a result of drinking. I've been in psycho wards, jails more times than I care to remember, religious homes for alcoholics, drying out places, alcoholic rehabilitation centers. And was on bottom and didn't know it. There are certain things that I want to remember. One of my greatest character defects is when things get good, I tend to forget. I want to remember the psycho ward at the Veterans Hospital in Durham, North Carolina. I want to remember the psychiatrist who very sincerely asked me, Tom, told me I've never met a man in my life who understands himself as well as you do. Why do you drink? And I cried like a baby. I said, if you can't tell me that, I'm dead. I don't want to forget the Rorschach test and the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. I don't want to forget occupational therapy where everybody else wove rugs and me, being different, made paladin gun and holster sets. I don't want to forget standing at the wire on the 9th floor. They put all the nuts on top, you know. I don't know why that is. Standing up at the wire, looking out at you and saying, ha, you can't get me now. Who the hell was the prisoner? That's this backward sight we alcoholics have. Insanity. Insanity. The incredible ability that I developed to lie effectively to myself. What is alcoholic insanity anyway? I used to say to myself, this time it's going to be different. This time if you just handle it right, you're going to be able to drink like everybody else. And I tried it, and I tried it, and I tried it, and it was a lie. I got a friend at home who says alcoholic insanity is like this. You take a normal man, an alcoholic, a schizophrenic, and put them in this room tonight, and if they walk out that exit back there's a man outside with a baseball bat, and he clops them right up beside the head. Said the normal man will never go through that door again. He doesn't want to get hit. He has the ability to learn from his past experience. And said the schizo will walk through the door one more time just to see if it was real, you know? And he'll get hit with it one more time, and he'll never go through that door again. Took him a little longer, but he learned. Said, but what about the alcoholic? Said he'll walk through that door time after time after time after time after time. And one day he'll get there, and if the man with the bat's not there, he'll sit down and wait for him. Now, I used to think my wife's family was weird, you know, and she told me a story once about a cousin of hers who one day when he was a kid was out in the backyard arguing with another little boy across the fence. And things weren't going his way, and he got furious. And he ran in the back porch and got a ball-peen hammer and came running back out, and he yelled at that little boy, said, if you don't do what I want you to do and say what I want you to say, I'm going to hit you on the head with this hammer, just like this. And like to killed himself. And you know, I chuckled about that. I said, them weird people on my wife's family. And I couldn't get it out of my mind. And finally it came to me, why? I said, Tom, you have lived your whole life that way. You have said to the world, if you don't do what I want you to do and say what I want you to say, I'll show you, I'll kill me. I'll show you, I'll kill me, I'll get drunk at you. And that's pretty smart, isn't it? That is really intelligent. But you see, I did not have the ability to learn from my past experience. I did not. At 23, I went to my first AA meeting. The intellectual royal ambassador for Christ graced you with my presence. There's a guy today who still laughs about my first meeting. And he said, I was there at your first meeting. And he said, I took one look at you, and I immediately punched the man next to me. And I said to him, he ain't just an alcoholic, he's crazy as hell. But I came in and I sat down in the great photographic mind and went to work. And there was a guy up front and he was talking, and on this side was 12 traditions, on this side a plaque with 12 steps, and in front of him a blue book. And the great mind said, all you got to do is memorize those steps and those traditions, that book, they'll put you up front, and they'll listen to you. You'll be on top of this outfit within 6 months. And I set out to memorize them, and I did. I can quote great portions of the big book to you now, but I don't have to. Thank God. And you know what they did? They put me up front, and they listened to me. It was horrible. I delivered some of the windiest dissertations on metaphysics and psychology and philosophy and theosophy and axiology and epistemology you have ever heard in your life. I wowed them. All we alcoholics want to wow them, don't we? Go to an AA discussion meeting, you're playing a game of can you top this? And that's all right. You know the only thing I couldn't do? Stay sober. With all that I knew about this program, I couldn't stay sober. When I wasn't talking, I was drunk. Now, you talk about a horrible experience. It is knowing everything there is to know about this program, being that close to the switch, and being unable to reach it. And wanting with all your heart, desperately, to reach that switch and be a sober person. I wasn't trying not to be sober. And for the next 7 years, the longest I ever stayed sober was 89 days. And I know it was 89 days because I had a calendar on the wall. And in North Carolina, we give a red chip for 90 days without a drink. And on the 90th day, I had a red chip taped on that calendar. And I'd come home every day and X off another day and go to bed real quick before I could get drunk. And 89 days, I stayed dry. And on the 90th day, I rested. And I used to sit in my den when I was in college, in the Buddhist position, reading The Imitation of Christ by Thomas A. Kempis, The Confessions of St. Augustine, I and Thou by Martin Buber, The Courage to Be by Paul Tillich, The Cloud of Unknowing by Dionysius the Areopagite. You ever read that one? I was reading about God, you see, by men who knew about God because I was trying to find God. And I never once stopped to think that each of these men had an experience which was personal and real with God before they wrote the book. And I used to sit there and very seriously meditate and read and wait for my spiritual awakening to happen. You see, I knew what a spiritual awakening ought to be. I figured if he could knock Paul off a jackass and light up a bush for Moses, he could give me one damn lightning bolt. And I can almost see God now, and I believe he laughs, looking down saying, there he is again. See, I sent him a lightning bolt, but he wouldn't like the color. Now, mind you, I was serious when I was doing this. I'm talking about insanity. Real insanity. Being separated from that which I must not be separated from. By my own actions, my own behavior, my own attempts to control. I used to go to an AA group in Burlington, North Carolina. And it's one of those groups where everybody had a seat. Old-timers, wall to wall. You didn't sit in nobody's seat. If you go there tomorrow night in Burlington, North Carolina, Barney will be leaning against the wall. I bet you. First row, second seat, be Jim S. Fourth row, fourth seat, Martha. Martha died 6 years ago. But nobody sits in her seat. And you go around the room, and Freeman will be there, and you go up to the right, the second row, second chair from the wall, sat the meanest man that God ever made. His name was Bill C., and I called him Grumpy, and I hated his guts. You know why I hated his guts? He told me the truth. He ain't never lied to me yet. Like Superman had X-ray vision. He'd say to me, how you doing, boy? I'd say, fine. He'd say, bullshit. Point his finger at me and call me boy. I never liked that. Say, boy, how come you always run around looking for God? He ain't lost. He'd say, boy, you don't think your way into good living, you live your way into good thinking. And I'd say, shut up. I am smarter than you are. I called him worse names, too. I hated him. God, I hated him. And you know when an alkie hates somebody, or when he knows somebody doesn't like him, he has to get that person on his side, doesn't he? And I set out to convert Grumpy. I'd go to those AA meetings for discussion on Tuesday nights, you know. Had so much heavy knowledge to lay on everybody, my knuckles was white, waiting for my turn to come. And they'd go around the room every Tuesday night, and everybody seemed like me said the same thing they said last Tuesday night. Especially Grumpy. He'd rattle his change, pull his nose, had a nose look like a pickle. Run his hand through his hair, and then he'd rattle his change and pull his nose, run his hand, say the same thing every Tuesday night. I didn't understand that. But I tell you something, it works. Man been sober 30 years. My wife laughs at me. Some days I walk around the house rattling my change, pulling my nose, running my hand. And you guys that have tried everything else to stay sober, try it. It's worked for Grumpy, it might work for you. And you know, every Tuesday night when it came my turn, everybody else had already said something. I was always last. They always got to me last. That hurt my feelings. See, none of them understood just how special and different I really was. And I'd say, Martin Buber said so-and-so, and Paul Tillich said so-and-so. And Grumpy would point his finger at me and say, shut up, dummy. You can't count the number of times I got drunk at Grumpy. And I set out one day to really impress him. I got a 12-step call. There's a difference in 12-stepping and soul-saving. Now, I didn't know the difference then. And I went out to save a soul. Like Galahad, I got on my white Charger and got my lance and headed down to the little town of Gibsonville, North Carolina. There's a guy laying up there in a cabin with no indoor plumbing, been drunk for 2 months and was turning blue. And I got him to the doctor, and I went down the street and got a lady to help me, and there was so much in that cabin, you can imagine, after 2 months and no plumbing, that we shoveled that place. And then we swept it, and then we mopped it, and everything was spick and span, and I got him back from the doctor, and he was going to live. He wasn't going to die. And I went to the phone, and I called Grumpy to get him to come down and see the wonders that I had wrought. You know, in going through all that stuff in that cabin, I found a gallon of wine, and when Grumpy got there, I was drunk too. It didn't impress him a damn bit. He'd say to me, and said it to me not long ago, said, boy, how long you been sober? And I told him, there was a long silence. Now, when an old-timer gives you a long silence, look out. He said, boy, you know, I used to figure every drunk had a chance in AA. And then you came along. And I drank on. And I couldn't quit. I looked for answers. I looked for answers in places where people find answers. I looked to religion, I looked to psychology, I looked to science, I looked everywhere. And it seemed no one could give me an answer. No one understood the nature of my disease. Each one understood a part of it, but nobody seemed to understand the total picture, and I drank. And I drank on until I was 30 years old. And I hit bottom. I hit that point in time which was the ugliest, darkest, meanest, sickest time in my life. But ironically, I look at it today as the most beautiful time in my life. Because all my choices were gone. All of my alternatives were gone. I realized two things. I can't drink, and I can't quit. And that doesn't leave much. And I went back to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did not think it would work. It has. I've got a son at home. His name is Jason. And he's beautiful. Now listen very closely to children. Society hasn't untrained children yet. They're still spontaneously honest and trusting. And they see the good points in us when everyone else is seeing the bad. And Jason is 11 now, but when he was smaller, you've heard of armchair philosophers. Well, he was a potty chair philosopher. When he sat on his potty chair, he wanted somebody to sit there with him and listen to him and talk to it. And I got the job one night. And out of nowhere, this kid looks up at me and said the following words. Dad, Jesus turns the power on. Now, I'm not trying to say you Jesus. These were his words. I was astonished. I said, how do you know that? Did your mother tell you? He said, no, sir. I said, did you learn it in Sunday school? Well, no, sir. Well, how do you know such a thing? And he said, it's simple. I just know. That's why. I think we all do. Else why is it that every man, woman, and child, alcoholic or not, when he reaches the point of no return where choices and alternatives exist no longer, and he knows he's going to die, will say the equivalent of 3 words, God help me. Isn't it because we know? Isn't it because it's built in? Isn't it like the big book says, deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God? That faith is a part of our makeup? I think it is. And I went back there and I sat on the back row and I got there late and I left early. I was worthless. I was on 5 years probation. I was never supposed to drive a car in the state of North Carolina again. I had a 2-year active road sentence hanging over my head if I were caught drinking. But I kept coming. And I was there for a while and I saw this man. And this man had good eyes. That's the only way I can describe it. If you want to see an alcoholic get sober, look at his eyes. Watch him when he first comes in and they're so red you don't even know he's got eyeballs. And they're shaking. And he couldn't hold a cup of coffee with 3 hands if he had them. And watch those eyes. 2 weeks and they clear up a little bit. And 3 weeks and they clear a little more. And then they start to bright. Bright. You see this great light coming from the inside out in this human being. And I think it's the God inside manifesting himself outward. Look at our eyes. And I like this man's eyes. And I asked him to be my sponsor. And you know what he did? He pointed his finger at me and said, boy, I've heard about you. They tell me you're crazy. But I'll sponsor you on one condition. I said, what's that? He said, we do it my way. And I said, yes, sir. What is your way? He said, it's in the book. And I thought, aha, I know that book. Oh, boy. And he started preaching at me. In the spiritual way of life, Tom, he said, you don't understand something and then do it. You do it and then you might understand it. This is a program of action, Tom. Action is the magic word. And he said, the first thing I want you to do is go to meetings early. And I want you to go in and shake everybody's hand and ask them how they're doing. And I said, I don't want to do that, Harry. I don't want to go to meetings early. I don't want to shake anybody's hand, and I don't care how they're doing. All I want to do is stay sober, and why do I have to do that? And he said, boy, you don't ask me why. You do it. And that's the kind of sponsor I had. And I started going to meetings early and shaking hands and asking people how they were doing. Now, mind you, I was looking that way and that way and that way. I looked at more shoe tops in my lifetime. And I'd mumble. In a few weeks, I was seeing some ankles. And I was seeing some shins. A few more weeks, I was seeing some knees. A few more weeks, I was seeing some hips. Saw some damn nice hips. And in a few more weeks, the magic happened. I was looking them in the eye. I was glad to see them, and I did care how they were doing. Now, this was a great lesson. My sponsor did not sit me down and say, Tom, love is, and pull out the Webster's Dictionary and define it for me. My sponsor told me to go to meetings early, shake people's hand, and ask them how they're doing. And in doing this, my sponsor taught me that love is not a feeling. Feelings come and feelings go. My sponsor taught me that love is pure action. It is God's pure action to His children, and from one child to the other and back to God, the never-ending, unbroken circle, world without end. Pure action. I didn't have to worry about where I was going every night. The horn blew at 7:30. I went on my first 12-step call with him, and there was a man in there, and he was shaky, and I said, what do I say, Harry? He said, you don't know nothing, you don't say nothing. Sit down and shut up. And you know, after a while, I got to putting out coffee cups and making the coffee and washing coffee cups and putting out ashtrays and washing ashtrays. You see, nobody was going to beat me at washing ashtrays. And I started getting sober. I was sitting at the college one day where I worked, and I was eating a bag lunch. And all of a sudden, a thought just came bursting into my mind. And the thought was this: Tom, you haven't wanted a drink in over 3 months. And I cried like a baby. And I got chill bumps all over. And I got another lesson from my son. My son was sitting beside me one night, and he says, Dad, why don't I be the dad for a while and you be the son? And I said, how are we going to work that? He said, it's simple. I'll grow up and be the father. You grow down and be the son. I've never heard a better description of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in all my life than growing down to be a child of God. My book says, first of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. It says hereafter in this drama of life, He's the director, He's the principal, we're His agents. He is the Father, we're His children. And it says most good ideas are simple. And this simple concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to what? Freedom! The same thing I found in the hotel room in Greensboro, North Carolina at age 15. But it had been an illusion, temporary, unreal. I have found in this program, and it's real, and it's not temporary. Freedom. I found my answer, and it solves all my problems, and it feels good. I'm just as hooked on AA as I ever was on booze, and by God, you can shoot me up with it every day. I'll never learn enough, and I know it. I can make mistakes, and that's good. And you know something else? I ain't ugly anymore. And I don't hate my guts. And I have no obsession to drink. Something has changed. And what you see before you tonight is the same equipment that came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Same brain, arms, legs, eyes, everything. But something has changed. What? Me? Why? Because I'm so wise and smart? Because I have such a great memory? No. But because the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has done exactly for me what it said it would do. Exactly. It told me if I fulfilled the conditions of the 12 steps of this program, certain things would happen to me, and they are happening. And the finest man I ever knew on the face of the earth was my own father. He loved me. When I was 18 years old, I joined the service to keep from going to jail. And I remember my father taking me down to catch the bus to go to the Air Force. And while he was telling me he loved me, he was pushing me up the steps on that bus. I love you, son, but goodbye. I was driving him crazy. He died January before last. I spent a lot of time with him. He wasn't a profound man. He was just the quietest, gentlest, kindest, most loving human being I've ever known in my life. And the morning before he died, he turned over and looked at me and he said, "Tommy, I love you. You're one of the finest men I have ever known in my life." Same father, same boy. Something changed. Radically. Incredibly. It changed. God has changed me. I say it flat out. I have made so many mistakes that should have got me drunk you wouldn't believe it. But I've been held in his hands. And he's taken every one of these characteristics, the sensitivity, the perfection, the idealism, the romanticism, every one of them he has turned and changed and made into something good. I'm still sensitive, I'm still romantic, I'm still a perfectionist. That makes me a damn good sponsor. Nothing new has been added to me. When I came here as a mess, God didn't say, "Go away, mess, and come back when you're straightened up." "Come on, mess. I'm going to clean you up and shape you up. I'm going to give you a thing called rebirth. You're going to start all over again. And you're going to be what you always wanted to be." And I trust it implicitly. The last couple of years I've been very good about my meditation and prayer. I have been very positive about my prayer. 2 years ago I did a very strange thing. I began to thank God for what I needed instead of asking for it. If there was something I needed, I said, "Thank you, God, for providing this to me." Do you know I don't have a need in my life today? Not one. I prayed to God specifically. I would like to have a position working with people that I want to work with, using all of my talents the way you want me to use them, finding meaning in my life. And I've got those things. 6 months ago, I got very sick. And I had to go to the hospital. And I was a physical mess. I was sitting on top of a heart attack because of some of the damage I'd done to my body when I was drinking. And I wasn't afraid. And I had to go on disability, which took away more than 50% of my income. And my wife said, "What are we going to do?" And I heard myself saying, and I've told some of you this, I heard me saying, "It's going to be all right, honey. God's taken care of us for a long time." 2 days later, a couple of friends walked in, knowing I had to stay in bed, and asked me to make phone calls and write letters for them in their business, and promised to pay me 25% of the profits, and told me they'd like to have me as a partner in the company. A couple of days later, a friend of mine who runs a treatment center came in, and he says, I'm not too well educated, and I have to speak to professional groups. Would you consider writing speeches for me to deliver? And I said, yes. Would you consider writing a newsletter for the center? Yes. Would you consider doing some classes for us, Tom? I don't care if you lay down and do them. I just want you to do them. We have not wanted for one single thing. I trust God. I don't just believe anymore. I trust God. I trust Him to use me in the best way possible. And I trust Him to provide every single thing that I need. I believe implicitly what the big book says. There is one who has all power. That one is God. I believe it when it says the only conditions for good sobriety are that you trust God and clean house. I believe this way. A song that Ethel Waters used to sing. Some of you may know it. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? When God is my portion, my constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. Whenever I am troubled, whenever clouds arise, when song gives place to sighing, and hope within me dies, I draw the closer to him. From care, he sets me free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. Let not your heart be troubled. These tender words I hear. And resting on his goodness, I lose my doubts and fear. Though by the path he leaded but one step, I may see. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free, for his eye is on the sparrow, and I know he watches me. And my favorite of all favorites, and I'll shut up. My meditation every morning, written by a guy much like me, who one day was up and the next day was down, who one day was writing, oh God, there's the Amalekites, the Philistines, and everybody else, where are you? And the next day was writing some glorious songs, and he wrote a goodie. And this is what I believe about the Father. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. You know what that means? I'm surrounded by all the supply that I need. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Serenity. He restoreth my soul. Rebirth. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. God is totally good. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Look at yourselves. Alcoholics, sober alcoholics, sitting in the midst of every enemy you thought you had in life. There's just as much booze out there as there ever was. But we don't need it. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I'm a happy fool, wiser than I've ever been, with knowledge that is not in my head, but in my heart. And my life has meaning and purpose, and it's full of love. And I can have it every day for free. Think about it.